The icon of the Yukon River is the mighty king salmon, also called Chinook. Now, historically, Alaskans have caught most of the fish, yet about half respond on the Canadian side of the border.
They must fight their way up more than 2,000 miles to reach their natural streams. But recently, numbers have dwindled so low, Alaska failed to meet its treaty obligations to Canada 2 years in a row. Tonight, we begin a series that looks at what that means for those who depend on the salmon.
KTVA 11's Rhonda McBride joins us with part one of Season of Hope. Rhonda.
Although last season went down as one of the worst on record, fishery managers are cautiously optimistic that treaty obligations with Canada will be met. But keep in mind that that goal has only been met twice in the last 7 years, despite drastic cutbacks in fishing. Tonight, photographer Jacob Curtis and I take a look at the communities on both sides of the border that are looking for answers. The sound of the seagulls seems to echo the loss people feel, the loss of a legacy handed down from generation to generation when kings were king and the river was flush. But today, the only kings that are legal to harvest are what Fish and Game brings back from its test fisheries.
Everybody's hoping for a king every day.
It's really hard right now.
There's only one king, a small jack. After scale samples are taken, it'll be given away. Although there are enough chums to go around, there's a long waiting list for the kings, which by tribal request go to the elderly and disabled.
Here's the prize. It's not the biggest, but here's what everybody wants. The king salmon.
The reasons why the kings have disappeared are still a mystery. The problems appear to be out in the ocean.
We've kind of referred to the ocean portion of a life cycle as being a little bit of a black box of information.
That's why people who live along this vast river system are the salmon's best hope by letting them swim by.
My sacrifice now is what I can do. It's my effort to try and sustain this population so that it will rebound.
Easier said than done, yet the question begs to be asked.
That if you had not taken as many fish, that if you had gotten more fish onto the spawning grounds in those prior years, maybe you'd be fishing right now.
I live on Lake LaBarge, which is the very, very end of the Yukon River Salmon Run.
Don Tays and a group of Canadians working to rebuild the Chinook Run just returned from a trip hosted by the Yukon River Drainage Fisheries Association, which has members on both sides of the border.
In fact, I've never had an opportunity to visit communities in Alaska. Although I've heard about these communities many, many times, and I know many of the individuals.
A group of Russians also took part in the exchange. They want to learn more about how Canadians and Alaskans are working together. They're fighting to save Chinooks on the Bolshia River, where the returns are much worse than they are on the Yukon.
We're only at the very beginning of kind of like grassroots community movement.
Sergei Vakrin believes high seas drift netting and poaching for caviar are to blame on the Bolshia, problems that can't be fought until people understand what's at stake.
Then of course there is great hope. We say in Russia, hope dies last.
It was a journey of hope, a journey towards understanding.
If the kings weren't declining, it'd be filled up with kings.
Да, если бы Chinook сейчас был.
The Alaskans and the Canadians share both a river and a passion for fish. Some First Nations communities in Canada have voluntarily stopped catching Chinooks to allow more to reach their spawning grounds. Some haven't fished for a decade, a sacrifice they hope the Alaskans will appreciate. The Canadian elders worry that the younger generation won't learn to put up salmon, so they hold camps.
These cultural camps are so important to them. It's part of their heritage. They want to maintain that until the Chinook come back. So they're going out and buying fish and then doing what they would do if they actually were out there fishing.
So they can be ready when the kings make a comeback. Are you hopeful?
I am, but I'm an optimist. Nothing's impossible.
The journey is far from over. But for Canadians, there are some signs on the Alaskan side of the river that a season of hope may be on the wing. Tomorrow night, photographer Jacob Curtis and I will take you to the lower Yukon River to look at how fishermen are trying to avoid catching kings, while at the same time going after chum salmon, what's known as the money fish for the region. Using mostly drift nets, fishermen have harvested more than 1.7 million pounds of summer chums.
Rhonda, when people think of dip nets, they think of families fishing down on the Kenai to put fish in the freezer. Now, this kind of sounds a lot different, actually.
Well, it is, and it could very well be the first commercial fishery in Alaska where dip nets have been used. Those of you who have dip netted can imagine the back-breaking work netting 1.7 million pounds of chums. But the good thing about dip nets is that you can release the kings. Now, if the traditional gill nets had been used, which do snag the kings and kill them, fishermen would not have been allowed to go after the chums, and that's millions of dollars to the local economy.